Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to episode 10 of Rock and Roll Religion. Can't believe it's been 10 episodes already. But we got a good one for you today. We are talking the barons of black metal themselves, the immortal Bathory. If there is a band that can be said to have perfected the black metal sound in the 80s, this is it. Like, these guys are where true black metal kind of got its roots. And joining me in this glorious endeavor is a friend of the channel, and most of you probably know him. Welcome, Imperitus.
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
How's it going, man? This one's going to be a good one.
Yeah, this band is just so good.
I mean, just look at that.
I mean,
that's their first fucking record, too.
I really don't remember the Red Eyes, but
this might be a different edition. Like, this might be CD.
Could be.
Because I know there's 3 different color patterns. I think there's the pure black and white, like I have on my shirt.
I think there's also a gold one too. Or
there's a gold one that I think was the vinyl.
Could be that. I think that also might have been one of the compilation covers too.
Could be, and I think this might be a CD release. And we got Sherry here. How's it going?
Hey, Sherry.
But
like we
joining us on the dark side today, huh, Sherry?
Like we talked about with Venom, having a big hand in black metal. This band not only had a big hand in black metal, but also had a big hand in Viking metal.
Oh, I mean, they created Viking metal.
Yeah. Essentially. So, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say, Venom's, the godfather of black metal. And they are.
but these guys perfected that sound.
Perfected it and just established certain, for
lack Nick.
Nick. Congrats on the over 1,000 followers, buddy.
Nice, man. I didn't see that.
Yeah, he hit 12. He hit 12 or 1,200 last night.
That's awesome, dude.
I saw it like 10 minutes after me stopped playing Mech Warrior.
Nice, right?
So congrats on that, Nick. It's well deserved. Looking forward to that party stream, bud.
That one's gonna be great. I'm fucking proud of you, man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but yeah, man, this is gonna be a good episode because we've got 2 of Bathory's best and their 2 first here. And like they came out of the gate swinging.
Oh yeah,
like they're. I mean, I actually prefer the version of Sacrifice that's on Scandinavian Metal Attack in '83,
right?
Which was their first actual recording of it, where it's a little slower paced, a little more punk. But I can't deny that this one's just a classic from pretty much cover to cover.
Oh yeah,
I mean, like, let's look at the track list here. I mean, first of all, the back of the album is just disgusting. It's simple, to the point, and evil as
good old Black Mark Records.
Yeah, back when they were still a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, are they still a thing?
No.
Well,
as far as I know, no, they're not. They haven't been around in a while.
Sorry, guys, you're probably going to see me cough quite a bit because I am not feeling all that well. So this is probably going to be a shorter stream. I will keep going as long as my voice holds out, though. So we will see how far we get. But yeah, I love that they called it Side Darkness and Side Evil too. And I think that was what they were referring to with the second album. But it's starting off with fucking 80s.
Yeah, that
was just gross. Like, what am I like? Especially in '84 when this came out, it's just like, what am I listening to? Because even Venom had not gone anywhere near this hard.
No, they didn't. They still had some more of the punk influence and some more of the trad metal influences going on,
and the vocals hadn't gone this
distorted. Yeah,
distorted either with that what would come to be a classic black metal just croak. That just sounds evil as hell on this record, and it's just awesome. Especially the first half of this record, you can't go wrong. Every single one's one of their best. I mean, Hades, Reaper, Necromancy, I really, really dig because of that heavy bass, that like pounding rhythm in the back, and then Sacrifice, which not my
classic.
Favorite, not my favorite version of that song, but it's still one of Bathory's best.
Yes.
And it was actually not known at the time. Like down here, it was directed by Corthon and Boss. It was not known that Boss was his father until both of them were dead.
I think that's a better thing, only because then that way he wasn't getting accused of favoritism and nepotism. Yeah. Because it was like,
Which, how ironic is that black metal probably wouldn't exist in its incarnation today without a little bit of nepotism and dad giving his kid a
Well, again, I was going to bring up Satir from Satyricon. That's how he got
Yeah.
his start. That he gave him the money to found Moonfog Productions and so on and so forth. And he caught a lot of shit from people back in the day.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, because usually when that happens, it's like, oh yeah, well, you bought your way into the industry, or daddy gave you a record deal because he wanted you to do something with your life, essentially. But these guys, I mean, I think they would have got a record deal whether or not Boss was his father.
I wonder, because there weren't too many bands doing the more extreme style at that time.
Yeah, you're right. And in '84 or '83, really. I'm not really sure how many labels would sign on to a band like Bathory.
Because if you think about it, in '83, it was the upcoming of speed metal and thrash, so labels were looking to sign that stuff. Death metal really hadn't become a thing yet. At that time, the first Possessed record and the first Death records hadn't come out yet. So it's hard to say whether they would have gotten picked up or not, but eventually they would have.
I think eventually they would have.
Once they kind of cleaned up their production a little bit, because as much as I love these two records, the production is rough.
Oh yeah, I mean, even by the track on here, I think it's either this one or The Return. You can actually hear the hum of the amp in the background, which was, I mean, that's what black metal is. It's supposed to be sound like it was recorded inside of a gravel truck, but the production's rough even for this one, and it's actually even worse on The Return, and that was the only album they ever did in a real studio.
I don't know. I kind of like the production on The Return.
Oh, I like it, but it's even rougher than this in some ways.
Yeah.
And then they weren't being shy with any of these song titles: Necromancy, Sacrifice,
right, Raise the Dead. Satan. Yeah, that's another classic too.
Yeah.
And inevitably that would become the name.
I think Raise the Dead is a standout on this one too.
Yeah, it's one of their more mid-pace songs too for their early
I tend to like it when they go for that lower tempo and really just hammer home those freaking riffs.
Well, look at off the second album, Born for Burning.
Born for Burning.
Not exactly the fastest of their songs, but it's so
and Under the Sign has a couple of songs like that too, that kind of go for that slower, more down-paced track that really hits. And that was really their last true black metal record, was Under the Sign in '87. But these tracks, holy shit! Like they came. This was not a band finding its feet. This was they came out for one reason and one reason alone, and just freaking went.
Yeah.
And I think Quorthon had an idea of what he wanted to do all along, and this was just him making it happen. And the bandmates he picked for it were both perfectly adequate too. I mean, Hanoi on the bass, and then Vons McBurger, who would later be identified as Jonas Ackerlund, the Swedish filmmaker. Yep, he's the drummer on this record, and the next one. Actually, funny story. Amber sent me a little article on a Swedish television show that apparently Tobias Forge is guest starring in to get smacked with a fiddle. And apparently the director is Jonas Ackerlund. So that's kind of an interesting coincidence. And it just fits Tobias's personality perfectly. Like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be in a TV show for like 10 seconds. Why? Because I feel like it.
Yeah, because I can.
Yeah, it's like because I can, and Jonas will probably think it's hilarious. But yeah, he was actually the ones who did Lords of Chaos.
Oh.
Yeah, unfortunately. But he went close to the book. The book's not very good.
No. I mean, the book has some good parts to it, but after they started exclusively focusing on the whole Mayhem Burzum thing, it's like, okay.
Yeah, and all the church burnings and shit like that. It's just like, yeah, that happened, but it was kind of going on in the background. But yeah, I mean, you can only polish a turd so much. So I think Jonas did a fine job with the movie. It's just that the source material wasn't very good.
Yeah,
you can only do so much with that, and and I think this version of War more than trumps Burzum's shitty ripoff of it in the '90s.
Yeah.
That was not one of Burzum's better ones. I mean, I'm not a Burzum fan at all anyway, mostly because of Varg's personality.
At least I have a tendency to separate art from artist.
True.
And yeah, Varg is a fucking whack job, but some of the music he's put out's been really fucking good.
Yeah, and if you're looking for stable, well-adjusted people, you probably shouldn't be looking at the black metal scene.
Well, I don't know about all that, but we do have some
Interesting
notable
people.
individuals.
Hey, yeah, we do have some interesting people that you'll find in the corners.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, what are they doing? We don't worry about that. They stay over there. They don't bother us. We don't bother them.
Yeah, I can think of at least 3 off the top of my head of just whack jobs in the scene.
Oh yeah.
And that's not without even thinking. It's just pop, boom, like, oh yeah, those guys.
I mean, I'd put Grawl on that list just because he believes everything he's saying.
Oh, Gall.
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry, Gall.
Gall's a whack job.
So you can tell he believes what he's saying.
Yeah, Rob Darkin's a bit of a whack job.
Yeah, Nurgle from Behemoth is kind of out there.
A little bit. Bard Faust. He's a bit out there.
Yeah. And well, hey, man, it's like I'm glad you're here, Fizz. I mean, this is an interesting place to start your metal journey if this is the road we're going down, because this is the beginnings of black metal, which is the most hyper satanic form of the genre you'll find. And that's one of the hallmarks. But the atmospherics on this record I wanted to talk about, because that was the first time a black metal record had really had that.
Yeah.
And the atmospheric intro and outro were just perfect. We're just the thunderstorm in the background and that bell. In fact, yeah. I considered making that like an intro. If I ever have an intro for the channel, I'll probably have that in the background if it's not copyrighted YouTube. But I can't imagine you could copyright something like that, because everybody's used it.
Yeah, and like I said, these guys set a standard for black metal back in '83 with the intro, the outro, the song titles, the iconography, the whole nine. Everything was
the look too.
Yeah,
they didn't have the skull paint and stuff yet, but they did have the leather. They did have the spikes. They had the long hair. They were most of the way there. The weird thing is these guys never really toured.
No.
And I think, the same reason for that is the same reason that, Korthon died of a heart attack at age like 43.
Well, there's that. And he didn't really have stable lineups.
No, they really didn't. They were basically guns for hire for most of it. These 2 albums are the only ones that had the same band members.
Well, okay, so then it was after this album going into the third one where he was looking for a new drummer, and every drummer he auditioned was just like, no, I don't want any part of this.
Yeah. He scared off like 15 of them before somebody finally said yes.
And nowadays you can't kick over a rock in Sweden without finding a black metal drummer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but back then it was just like, oh. Yeah. And freaking Fizz brings up an excellent point, and that is exactly what these guys were. It's mostly tongue-in-cheek. It's mostly keep in mind this is the height of the Satanic Panic, so this was mostly a troll on the Christian right and all that stuff. So I don't think a lot of the first wave guys believed it. Some of the second wave guys and later do.
Yes.
Like we said, Gall,
John Nodvite.
Yep.
Like I'm sure I butchered his last name, but
probably, but whatever.
I mean, his philosophical and quote unquote religious ideas is what led him to removing himself from the planet.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of that too.
Nick, I think they did tour a little bit.
They toured once around Sweden, but that was it.
I think they came to the States too, at least once, because I think in Razorfist Metal Mythos, there's footage of Korthon in the States.
Huh. I mean, it's unfortunate because I would have loved to have seen a Bathory stage show. That would have been fucking nuts.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I don't think it was like a long tour. Or they did very many, but I'm pretty sure they came to the States once.
That would have been probably about 84, 85. And that would be the only time they did it. I don't think Korthon was up for it, because a tour is a brutal process. I mean, you're basically going 100% for 6-8 months at a time. And you gotta have to freaking really try to
Yeah, keep it together.
keep it together. And most guys who are in their prime are absolutely wrecked after a tour. I can't imagine the guy with the health issues that he has doing well with it. And that's probably why they never did it again. Because he was probably just like, wow, okay, that was fucking brutal.
Yeah. Like I said, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they did at least once.
Possibly. But I gotta go for a second. I will be right back.
Mm. The funny thing is, I discovered this band not even by themselves. For a while there, when I was trying to check out new bands and look for new music, I had a tendency to buy a lot of compilation albums, be it from a label putting out a compilation of all their stuff, or in case with this band, that's how I found them, was on a Black Mark Records compilation. A lot of bands I discovered in the black metal scene came from the first two Blackened record comps, and those just had some killer stuff on it for the time. But these guys influenced so many bands in so many ways. It's just unbelievable. Some of the best, underground metal in 83. Think about it this way. This came out in 83, 84. Slayer's first album was 83. And while the lyrical content might have been similar, the sound was nothing at all alike. Like, at all. Slayer actually had a bit more of trad metal influence on them, a bit more of the new wave of British heavy metal going. But, I would have to say I wouldn't be surprised if Bathory influenced some of Slayer's later stuff. Why, thank you, Nick. It's appreciated. It's it's undeniable that how much of an impact Bathory had on the metal scene.
Yeah, man. Like, even outside of their genre, everybody's heard of them. I mean, even I've heard of them, and I tended to stay away from black metal.
I'll have to do something about that.
Well, I tended to. And now that I've actually kind of gotten my feet in there, I do understand it, and I really do enjoy some of it. But yeah, yeah, he's right. But no, Bathory had some seriously deep connections with other parts of the scene in ways that I don't think anybody really understood for a lot of years.
And if you talk to anybody in the late 90s from the second wave of black metal, Bathory was always mentioned.
Oh, yeah, every single one.
Every single one, to the point where you have Burzum being pretty much a old school Bathory ripoff with worse production. Yeah,
pretty much. And it was like literally like, oh, who's your biggest influence? Bathory.
Yeah, Bathory, Hellhammer,
some Venom in there,
Sodom. Those are usually the three big ones that get mentioned, and then some Venom. Yeah,
Sodom's the interesting one because they started as black metal, and then after like 4 or 5 albums, they went thrash metal, and I really enjoy that stuff.
And then now they've kind of reverted to like a hybrid.
Yeah, which I really enjoy. They did name the band after Elizabeth Bathory. In fact, there's a song on not either of the albums we're covering today, but Under the Sign of the Black Mark, called Woman of Dark Desires. That's all about Elizabeth Bathory. And they named the band after a song by Venom, who sang about Bathory, and then obviously these guys. And then I think Ghost did a song about her too.
A lot of people have done songs about Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh yeah, when you're talking black metal, like she's like the ultimate,
a medieval serial killer. Sure, why not?
That was into like sacrificing people and shit. Like,
well, supposedly that isn't necessarily 100%.
I've heard that. Like, I've heard conflicting stories now about her. Because really basically her family.
Yeah, because from what I've heard, like her family was kind of important in the region.
And hey, Shellback's here.
What's up, Shellback? Man? And then, a lot of the information that came out after the fact was people who were not fans of her family. They were actually, familial familial enemies. So who knows? It's hard to say.
Her family was extremely powerful and extremely wealthy.
One of her relatives was a king.
Yep, and she really she owned like a third of Hungary.
Yeah. So that there is always the possibility that yes, the stuff that was said she did. And there's also just as great of a possibility that it was the equivalent of a medieval hit piece.
Yeah, basically, it could have. And it's happened so long ago, you're never going to tell either way.
Right, because I do a lot of historical documentary watchings, and people say the same things about how, for example, the Druids in the UK were colored a certain way by the Romans who, came across them. And that's, how we look at things like Druidism, and it's not necessarily what it was. It's just how the Romans felt about it, and that hearsay is continued through the ages.
Yeah, I mean, and it's partially too history is written by the victors.
Yes, and the Romans won a lot.
Yeah, so the Romans got to decide pretty much who was who for quite a while. Although, could you imagine, like, if they saw like some of the shit that the English are up to now, they'd probably just be like, "Hang on a bit, we'll be right back."
Yeah,
and then just kill everyone.
Hang on, we need to go. Hey, Executus, go get us another legion.
Yeah, right. That
is actually historically true.
That is a thing. The Britons,
yes,
specifically would use the Wicker Man,
and it was
an Iron Maiden track, by the way.
Yes,
bad movie though.
And they didn't do it as in the case of They did it for sacrificial reasons, but they didn't do it to their own people. If they conquered another tribe, anybody that was captured after the battle, you were getting tossed into the freaking Wicker Man.
Yep,
and it was a sacrifice to their gods. Like, look what we did. We defeated our enemies. Give us more power and more glory.
And sometimes it was voluntary.
Yes.
And it would usually be the leader of whatever settlement would sacrifice himself to the god of the harvest for
a good crop, or make sure things didn't fail,
or continued prosperity or something like that. But yes, that actually did happen. And it was very similar. It was very similar to when the Spanish showed up in the New World and saw the Aztecs literally sacrificing people by
hundreds of people a week in some cases, like just to the point where it's ridiculous.
And we're talking an era of European history when the Inquisition was still a thing.
Yeah.
So they were probably like, "Oh hell no."
Yeah, well, and then look what happened.
Yeah, it's like, this shit is not gonna fly.
Yeah, so many good tracks on this album too. In Conspiracy with Satan, Sacrifice, Raise the Dead, Reaper.
I mean, Armageddon might be the weak point, but even that's pretty high standard. But yeah, I mean, there's really not an a track on this record that I don't like, and it's a short record too. It's like 26 minutes.
Yeah, it's not as bad as a grind album, but I mean, I'm sure you've seen the meme. It's like, oh, I showed up 30 minutes late to a grind show, missed the first 4 bands. Yeah,
right. But some of those shorter records, they did everything they needed to do. I mean, this doesn't. This doesn't feel like it's an incomplete record or they were rushed.
No, and sometimes, like, I've noticed some bands, it's like, okay, you didn't need to make a 90-minute long record.
Iron Maiden, looking at you here.
But more specifically in like this style. Like, I don't need like a 90-minute Marduk album.
Yeah, some of
it would rule, probably rule, but they don't vary their stuff up enough, in my opinion. Caladan Brood being as long as it is, because that's some epic stuff.
Yeah, and it's a lot of different stuff in there too.
Yeah, like my favorite track on that record is like 13 minutes long.
Yeah,
and it doesn't drag. So,
and they mix some prog elements and stuff like that in there too to really keep it. Later,
you're not wrong, Nick.
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
Absolutely. It's like you could be almost an hour late and they're probably still warming up.
Yeah, they're still like halfway through their first song.
Yeah. It's like, oh, don't worry, they haven't even gotten to the solo yet.
Yeah. God, I hate some Doom so much.
I mean, there is some great Doom metal, like Candlemass, stuff like that, but even their stuff gets over long.
All right, Candlemass.
Some of their songs are like 7 minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, 7 minutes isn't too bad of a length.
No. But they also a lot of times they don't vary up their stuff very much either, so
Right.
it kind of drags into
That's the
same
problem with
stuff.
Doom is a lot of and even black metal in some cases, it's not varied enough to.
It starts to just sound samey after a while.
Yes, that's why, for example, the first Borknagar record, it went from instrumental song, instrumental song, instrumental song, and then I think there was a couple cases of 2 songs back to back, but it was enough of a varied sound between each track. And those were relatively long songs, like the 5 to 6 to 7 minutes. And
You could never get away with that line today.
No.
Unless it just went over people's heads.
It probably would.
That's all we need. A Druish princess.
Shit, I lost my track. God damn it.
That's true as well.
Yeah, very. Or in some cases, Friday Night Tights.
Yeah, where it's like, I showed up an hour late. How are we still at Gary?
How are we still doing intros? What is wrong with you people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of how Dick's Division works too on most of our streams, where it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
We'll get to the article eventually, probably.
But I kind of wonder, and like I said, this is something I wanted to talk to 70s about at some point, how people of the era reacted to some of these albums coming out.
Something like Bathory.
To Bathory, to like the first Maiden record, the first Slayer album, so on and so forth. Like I had the privilege of talking to a friend of mine who was probably a little older than 70s. And I was talking to him one time, we were just hanging out. And I was like, oh yeah, I was asking him, what was it like when Pink Floyd albums were new? When they, like Dark Side of the Moon dropped, and that was like a new thing. He's like, for the people who were into it, it was mind blowing. And there was nothing else like it, putting on a record for the first time and just having, your back of your head blown off by something you've never heard before.
Well, I mean, I imagine it's a pretty similar feeling with, this record where you have no idea who these guys are. So you throw the record on as soon as you buy it, and all of a sudden Hades starts thundering out the speakers, just like, holy shit, what am I in for?
Yeah, I don't think people really knew what what the fuck was going on here.
Yeah,
between the production and the vocal style, people were probably like, what the fuck is this?
I know I've gotten that look a couple of times, on my forklift at work or just playing.
Oh yeah, I've heard me tell the stories about me, pulling into work and people are putting packages of groceries in their vehicle and they stop, like with bag in hand, just looking at me like, what the fuck?
Like, what is going on over there? I want no part of that. And then you'll probably see that one guy who's like, nice.
I've had it happen. Not that, but I've pulled up to a stoplight blaring something. The guy next to me looks over, just kind of throws the horns and nods his head. It's like, all right. Okay, there we go.
This guy knows what's up.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing was, like, my boss at the warehouse I used to work in, kind of an older guy, pretty middle of the road, like, he seemed like a pretty normie guy. And then I was blasting, I think it was this record. And he's like, Bathory, nice. I'm like, all right. You can never tell.
No, you really, really can't.
No, and this record just absolutely set the tone for what would come later. So many ways.
I mean, look at all the various bands that, are unmitigated Bathory worship.
Oh yeah, I mean,
not just
pretty much everything that came out in the late 80s.
Dark Throne to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Mayhem, absolutely.
Yes.
Whether it was good or not is debatable. But,
a lot of the first wave of black metal bands really. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if even Sepultura was influenced by Bathory.
Probably.
Sarcophago definitely was. They're another Brazilian band, very influential,
especially with that tremolo picking and shit like that. Like that, that sounds really familiar in songs like Refuse, Resist, Roots.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, yeah, I can see the black metal influence there.
Well, I was talking even their older stuff like Morbid Visions or Schizophrenia.
Yeah, Yeah, you can hear it there too, quite strongly.
You know,
But no, it's
look at Troops of Doom, for example.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Sepultura probably did. Like you say, Sarcophago, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Both excellent bands, by the way. You should check them both out if you haven't.
Especially older Sepultura.
Mm-hmm.
Arise and earlier is just so
they're such a
good.
weird band in terms of their popularity, in that they'll come out with like 2 or 3 albums and tour and be like the biggest thing in the scene for a while, and then they'll just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And then come back like 5 years later with more material.
Yep.
And then like rinse and repeat the last 25 years. Just like, where do you guys go?
One of these days, we should really work on seeing if we can't get Dan Vasc on here to talk about Brazilian metal.
Oh, dude, I would love to fucking get him on here. I think we'd have a fun conversation about some of the Brazilian bands out there.
I love his outlook on what metal is.
He has the perfect idea of what heavy metal is,
mm-hmm.
as an ethos, as a mindset, as a genre of music, and what it means to so many people. And he's so passionate about it. Just like, fucking yes, dude. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What he said.
Yeah. And you are absolutely right about that album, Nick. That is probably the premier Sepultura album.
Yeah, Beneath the Remains is pretty fucking killer. It's among their best, if not the absolute best.
It's a toss-up for me between that and Arise.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
You know, Arise is the same style with just a slightly better production.
Yeah. And was the Rise their first record?
No, first record was Morbid Visions.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was Morbid Visions, Schizophrenia, Beneath the Remains, Arise.
I come into their
Chaos
album all
AD
out of order.
and
So
Roots.
I came into their records all out of order, so
yeah,
I'm very fuzzy on the time.
I mean, I started with Arise and went backwards.
Yeah, I think I started somewhere in there and then kind of went forward and then back and then got away from them for a while and then got back into their early stuff. So I have no freaking clue what order those happened in.
But yeah, like we were saying, so many different bands from so many parts of the world and so many different styles of metal were influenced by this band.
Oh, yeah. And
who's essentially one dude and a bunch of session musicians.
Yeah, and they're single-handedly the reason Scandinavian black metal exists.
Yeah.
Because everyone wanted to be the next Bathory.
Pretty much.
And I think there was a bunch of bands or a bunch of artists out there who wanted to explore this style of metal. It was 1984. Fizz, I haven't seen that episode yet. I am going to get to it tonight. I've been sick the last couple of days, so I've been basically blanket burritoed on the couch trying not to cough up a lung. But yeah, what was I saying? Completely lost my train of thought.
And we're both batting 1,000 today there.
Yeah, right. It's like, and it's gone. But no, I mean, these guys, I think, oh yeah, that's right. There was a lot of bands, I think, that were willing to explore this side of music and this the darker material. But it being 1983 and the height of the Satanic Panic, no one wanted to be the first one. Because no one was sure what was going to happen next.
Yeah, because they weren't sure if they were going to turn around and...
Because the second or third band would probably get away with it, but the first one was probably going to take a lot of heat.
Yes.
And they did.
And they did, yes. A lot of bands in that era really did.
Like, no venues would sign these guys. Friggin' no label would talk to you. All right, Nick. I'll talk to you later, man. But no, I mean, it was just a... it was a weird time. Because in a lot of countries, too, I mean, Americans don't really understand. There was a state religion.
Still is in Sweden.
In Sweden, Norway, I believe Finland as well.
I'm not sure about Finland, but I definitely know Norway and Sweden have state religions.
And that was a big deal because the state could come down on these guys. It wasn't just like, the record labels wouldn't sign you or whatever. Like, this could have ended them and landed them in jail probably.
I don't know about all that. I mean, I don't know.
Fucked up bad enough, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe, they definitely did get a lot of blacklisting and blackballing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, labels wouldn't touch them, venues wouldn't book them. So
No
I think
one
that,
wanted to be associated with this kind of thing.
yeah,
They didn't want that kind of heat.
so that, I mean, that might also explain why they didn't play live a lot. They just couldn't get booked.
True. Yeah,
And
trying to
that's
book it for it must be fucking disgustingly hard when you're Bathory.
And I mean, I think that's why
Especially
too. Like,
seeing some of the footage from the stage shows.
yeah,
Where you
I
have
believe,
like fake body parts and blood everywhere, candles all over the place. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? Most venue owners would probably be like, no, absolutely not. I'm not having that in my club.
Well, look, I made the comment, I believe it was on Rock Band stream this past Monday, about how Europe ruined Scandinavia for metal for a few years because people thought like Scandinavian metal, that's the first thing that came to mind was Europe, and people were like, that's not fucking metal.
Yep. It's like,
but meanwhile, this band was,
hey, Amber's here. How you doing?
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right that Europe kind of killed metal in Scandinavia for a couple of years. Everyone's just
it took a long time before it took until I want to say for any sort of notable recognition, it took until like the death metal days.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the late 80s, probably early 90s more so.
Well, that's what I mean by the death metal era.
Yeah, before they started burning off that stigma of, oh, you're like those guys who have Europe, right? Like, oh, we really
no, because once the Swedish death metal scene started really kicking off with bands like Grave and Entombed and Dismember and At the Gates and even like the first couple In Flame albums.
Yep.
No one, once that stuff started coming out, nobody even remembered Europe. Like the first time I heard Entombed, I was like, oh, they're Swedish. My mind didn't automatically go, oh, that's the same place Europe's from. And I went, no, this, it was the Left Hand Path, which is a great album.
True.
It was just, oh yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I mean, but it took a long time to burn that stigma out of, like, especially normies' minds.
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh, Swedish metal, you mean like Europe? It's like, oh, please stop saying that. It hurts my soul. Especially when at the same time, actually before Europe, I believe, these guys were out.
Yes. But again, due to the Satanic Panic, due to not having a steady lineup, they weren't going anywhere, touring wise.
Yeah, they weren't going to go anywhere in terms of popularity. At least in the mainstream. I mean, on the underground scene, everyone knew who these guys were.
Yeah.
Their tapes were getting traded around locker rooms and clubs for decades.
And here's something for people in the chat to think about. This came out in 1983-84. No internet, no nothing. And parts of Europe, especially Scandinavia, it was more like 1960s, 1970s for them.
Yep.
With some technological upgrades that would be more to the 80s. So imagine trying to discover these bands that were underground.
Unless you saw them live.
Unless you saw them live, you either had to know people who tape traded, or you saw an ad in a magazine somewhere, or actually got your hands on a few fanzines that were actually talking about the more underground stuff.
Or you had a little record shop that would carry stuff like this.
Yes. I mean, I was lucky in that aspect.
But like for the mainstream audience, it just these bands might as well have just not existed. But like that was a really cool scene in the 70s and 80s, was like that underground tape trading system.
That continued well into the 90s.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of those, that's how Hellhammer got discovered.
Yeah.
Was like 8 years later when they'd already moved on to Celtic Frost.
Right.
Somebody called and contacted Tom Warrior about, publishing the album or the demo. He's like, yeah, fine, I guess. Just don't ask us to tour on it because, we're past that.
Yeah, we're not doing that anymore.
But that one album by Hellhammer is just brutal.
I think for a while there, didn't they still play certain Hellhammer songs when they played live, and didn't they?
Oh yeah, I think they played Horus Aggressor and a couple of other ones.
And didn't they turn around and turn a couple of those Hellhammer songs into Celtic Frost songs?
Yeah, let's face it, they are the same band essentially.
Yeah.
So, and the writer was Tom Warrior, so might as well. I mean, especially if that's the only way they'll get any play out of their early stuff, then might as well go for it. Because Celtic Frost is certainly bigger than Hellhammer ever was.
Yeah,
at least at first, until you realized how influential Hellhammer was. That guys who heard it really dug it, but nobody ever heard it.
Right. I didn't hear it until way later on, and And so after I'd already discovered, Scandinavian black metal.
When I went down the rabbit hole on black metal, I kept hearing about Hellhammer. I could never find that record. Like, not for the longest time, like an actual like record of it. And then I did finally get it. I'm just like, okay. But it took me a minute to find someplace that had it.
Yes. And that's the other thing too, guys. You would not go to like your mall record store and find Bathory.
Yeah, no, you mean this was not going to be hanging up in, freaking
I mean, maybe
FYE or whatever was around at the time. Tower Records was still there. You'd never find this shit there.
By the way, you might get you might go to like a mall record store and find like a copy of their album.
Maybe, yeah.
And the amount of dust you'd find on the jacket because it'd be buried somewhere.
Yeah, like because somebody who used to work for the store had liked the band and bought like 2 copies of it just in case someone wanted one, and it's like behind the counter somewhere. Nobody even remembers where it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like that's the only time you'll find one in like a mainstream store is like if somebody got a couple as like a promo or something like that, and you're never gonna sell that to most people. An album like this, hell no. Your average music fan's gonna look at this and go, "Yeah, I'm all set."
Yeah, well, yeah. Again, it goes back to people who first heard this album back in the day were probably like, "What the fuck is this?
Mm-hmm.
This is not what I expected."
And yet, a lot of the real music nerds sat there and were like, "Holy shit, he's doing this! He's doing this! God damn, this guy's great!" Thinking those vocals are tough as hell to do. In a lot of ways, it's a lot tougher and a lot harder on your vocal cords to do this than death metal.
Yeah.
Because it's really just more of a croak that I'm not even willing to attempt. At least not right now, because I'll probably start coughing my ass off. But it really just adds that evil and like sinister quality into it. That I think really makes this album special. And it makes it really stand out from the earlier Venom stuff. Because this was black metal fully formed. This wasn't, Venom where they were still exploring the idea and really kind of seeing where it went and how people enjoyed it and whether or not it took off. This was black metal in its in its final form, essentially ready to go and ready to be unleashed on the world. And this record, I think, was another one of those musical watersheds like we were talking about with Venom, where it really was just it was nothing. There was nothing before it that was like it, and it changed everything going forward. But yeah, and then this next record, if anyone thought that what Bathory was doing here was a fluke, this album right here corrected them.
Yeah, because at the time you'd have a band come out with their debut album, and then their follow-up would have such a noticeable change.
Yeah, it would either be way better or way worse.
Yeah, be it in the production, be it in what they were actually doing, song structures, guitar tone, whatever. But they actually got even more fouler and nastier with this album.
Oh yeah, this one's way out there. I mean, and again, it's one of those albums like if this was the one you got into Bathory on, then this was an absolute banger of a record and an absolute shock to your system coming from the more mainstream side of the house. Like if this was the first Bathory record you heard of, like your friend was into black metal, like really liked it, really liked the first record and asked you, and you heard about it and wanted to pick a record up, and this was the one you got, holy God, did you get Bathory at their best. I mean, just the first 2 tracks, you have that atmospheric intro and then Total Destruction and Born for Burning.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a freaking amazing intro lineup. It's just holy shit.
Oh, for sure. And again, they did the same thing with the intro and the outros.
Yep, and they're the same. I believe they're the exact same, actually, on this one. At least the track itself.
In my listing, it's got Revelation of Doom, and then the last track is just says Untitled.
Oh, let's see what Spotify has to say.
This album had so, and I love how they don't use the full name for the album. It's not just
the
return; it's the return of darkness and evil.
Well, what's a reference to the sides of their first record? And
yeah,
I do love that they just put the return though. It's just like, we're back.
Yeah. Again, so many good tracks on this. Possessed, The Wind of Mayhem, Born for Burnt, and this album, in my opinion, is outside of some of the notable tracks in the first record. This one,
Bestial Lust, was
just so good,
and it was just straight through. There was no real side A bias on this one because, the first 3 tracks are fucking stellar, but the back half of the album's good too.
Right, and we keep talking about how these bands in the early '80s influenced bands in the mid to late '90s. Bathory is still influencing bands today.
Yeah, even though the band is gone and Corthon's been dead since 2005, they are still influencing bands that are coming out 20 and probably will forever.
The neo thrash band Toxic Holocaust is pretty much Bathory Sodom style black thrash.
Yeah.
And they do it. They've done covers of Bathory. They've done what did they do? Sacrifice.
Yep.
And they have their song titles are very much so similar to the vein of these first 2 albums. At least the first few records from them were anyways.
Oh yeah. I mean, and if you thought it was going to get any better on the other side of the album, yeah. I didn't get a good enough quality version that you can actually read it, but it's quite a piece, even just on the exterior. And I think that was part of the point too, is to make a visual statement too.
Well, that's something I think black metal's always done well, is had a good physical, or no, not so much physical, but a presentation.
Yeah, a good visual presentation where we say good, but very vivid distinct. And very just
over the top.
Immersive.
And over the
you're
top.
You're in this now.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's kind of goes with some of the lyrical content of, no, it's way too late. You're coming with me. We're going to hell.
Yeah, we're going on a journey. We're going on a journey. Pack sunscreen.
Yeah, right. And and I love that. It's just that lyrical content, because it's just if you're playing this record, it's already too late. It's if you're hearing this, guess what? You're fucked.
Things aren't going to go how you expect them to.
Yeah, or maybe they are, in which case, welcome.
Yeah. It's, again, at the time you had the metal at the time, think 83, 84. You only had...
Hey, Mila's here. How's it going, Mila?
Hey.
Good to see you.
There's only, if you think back at the time, 83, 84...
I think this was 85 by this point.
Okay, 85. You had, if you look at the metal at the time, the hair bands were starting to come up big at this point.
That's really starting to go that way.
Yep.
The thrash metal bands are in their full swing.
Mm-hmm. In 85, I think Slayer put out Hell Awaits.
Yep.
Or that might have been 84.
It was right around that period.
Yeah.
And then, Metallica's first 4 were, thundering right along, because you had
85 might have been Ride the Lightning.
Kill 'Em All in 83, and then Ride the Lightning in 84.
Yeah.
And then Master of Puppets was 86.
Yes. And then, Testament probably at this point had possibly put out their first record.
I think they had, or they were recording it.
Yeah. Exodus was getting ready to do Bonded by Blood.
Yep. Overkill had just started.
Yep. I've seen them a bunch of times.
I've never seen Overkill. I really want to.
Good show.
Just for the song Lean Green Killing Machine.
Yeah. They put on a good live show, and Bobby Blitz is a cool dude.
Yeah, and let's face it, it was written about my people, so...
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we refer to ourselves as green killing machines
Yeah.
or amphibious green players. But no, this was a really interesting period in music where you had like 4 different styles of metal that were all really popular at the time or coming into their own and really just expanding.
And not too long after this, Possessed put out 7 Churches.
Yep, and Death wasn't far behind them.
No, Death. Yeah, it's hard to. It depends on who you talk to. People say Death was first, or Possessed was first, or whatever. And then it's just weird too because everybody's like, oh well, metal was, people think like the underground extreme metal scene of black metal and death metal is a more recent thing.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, that's because now people are actually hearing about it.
Yeah,
before they actively tried to suppress the shit out of us.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, that doesn't happen. We're not with them. There are no bands like that. Please don't look over there.
Yeah, no. Buy our record, not that.
Yeah, it's like don't look over in that corner. You won't like what you see.
Buy our record. We need to keep our coke habit going.
Yeah, right. And this was probably right about the time, guys like Mayhem were getting into music because they were really young.
Yeah.
And this is probably like right when they were starting to get into these bands and stuff like that. Because, angsty teenagers love some black metal. But, and then you have probably bands like Mayhem, Burzum, maybe even Emperor that were probably listening to this shit when they were in high school.
It's entirely possible. But then again, considering how young Emperor was when they were doing their stuff.
Yeah, they were still probably listening to it in high school. It was just a little further down the track.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of these bands too were, I think Corthon was 18 when the first record came out.
That was like that for a lot of bands in the underground. Like you go and look at old pictures of like Dark Throne from their first record, they look like a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Same with like Amorphous from Finland. You look at them like, whoa, how young were you guys when you recorded this? And you are not wrong, Mila. You are not wrong.
Yep. And the funniest part is a lot of black metal fans I know are ultra leftists.
It was just funny.
Yeah, it's like, because it's like, oh, okay. So you don't have a problem with, them basically trying to cancel half the bands you listen to? Like, they tried to go after Marduk.
Yeah, that didn't end well.
Yeah, it's like, really, it's like, oh, but they don't want to say what they really think. It's like, you're talking, I mean, we cannot say the names of some of these songs on the stream or I will get freaking shut down. And
those weren't even the tracks that people were complaining about, ironically enough.
I mean, and just the fact that Panzer Division Marduk was recorded, like, it had a tiger on the front of it and was recorded in freaking Warsaw. It's like, yeah, no shit. That's where they recorded it.
Yeah, there's that whole big deal with them. Like, oh, this live album name is the name of a concentration camp. No, it's the German word for Warsaw, you dipshit.
Yeah. And that's also where they recorded the fucking album.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's named Warsaw. I think they confused that and Dachau.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Well, what's funny is Razorfist brought it up. It's like they referenced this book talking about Nazi black metal bands. And the next goddamn page was a list of bands that used World War II as lyric topics, but weren't Nazis. And Marduk was on that list.
Dude, and Sabaton's on that list.
Yeah.
Even though the only time they've mentioned the Holocaust was a song called Rise of Evil. Like, really? Yeah, these guys are secretly Nazis. I mean, yes, they've done songs where the Germans in World War II were the good guys, but that's because there were instances where in World War II, the Germans were acted like good guys.
It wasn't common, but it did happen.
It did happen. It happened quite a bit, actually. Just not if you were Russian.
Well, that goes without saying.
Yeah. And the Russians hardly have any room to talk with how they treated the Germans later.
Correct.
Where some of those guys, like, they knew that they were in a German prison camp or in a Soviet prison camp. And up until like 1955, they just wouldn't release most of them. Like, especially most of the Sixth Army at Stalingrad, they were like, "Yeah, no, we don't have them.
These people, we do not have who you think we have."
Yeah, it's just like, dude, it's like, we know you have these people. It's like, yeah, we don't know we don't know where they are. It's like, okay. Hail the Gilk Man. How's it going, my friend? Yeah, and Mila says it perfectly here. Black metal is not for everyone. It is not for the faint of heart, and it is not for those who cannot take some pretty serious, stock of themselves and decide what you're into and what you're not. And yeah, man, it's gonna be awesome. We are going to see Doctor Strange 2, which will probably mostly consist of me and Brightest Day making fun of it. In like 2 weeks down in Boston, and that should be great. We've done 2 meetups already, and it's always been a great time. So cannot wait for that. But yeah, black metal is a very, very different style of music.
I said it. I think I said this
you
on.
got dropped there.
What stream did I say this on? It might have been on Rock Fans on Monday, but black metal can go from this hyper satanic, brutal music for like the first half of an album, and then the second half of the album they're talking about like nature in Norway.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or in some cases, the whole album's that, but it's still in like pure black metal form.
Yeah, some of Celtic Frost stuff is kind of like that, where it's a little more druidic and stuff like that.
And then case in point, Enslaved. The first few Enslaved albums sounds like just pure unadulterated black metal, but they're talking about Viking
just
stuff.
Just the name of the band would send them reading.
Oh, Enslaved.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? With them, not so much. I don't think, because they've drifted away from more of the black metal sound and gone like more of a hybrid between prog and black metal.
Okay, but I mean, even just the name would probably be enough to get them canceled these days.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they're still around, so.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't say much. I mean, there's a lot of bands that are still around that probably shouldn't be.
But at the same time, if Cannibal Corpse never got canceled, in the day, and they have had tons of controversies.
Oh God, yeah.
But
they were like a lightning rod for the entire death metal scene. Of like, they were staying, kind of to the side of it, and Cannibal Corpse was just standing right in the way.
Well, they also had the most, at the time, quote unquote, grotesque lyrics. Obituary was bad, but they were not even close to as bad as Cannibal. Entombed didn't really get into the gore stuff all that much. Like a lot of the Swedish death metal bands didn't really get into the gore side of things. They did, and they didn't.
Like, it wasn't as vivid.
Yeah, like Cannibal was just straight up like, wow, what is wrong with you guys to come up with something like that?
I agree with you, Mila. The Return is my favorite record too, from these guys. I mean, it's just the perfect follow-on from the first album, and I think it went just far enough in terms of musical progression and stuff like that it didn't sound too jarring.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, my favorite Bathory tracks are probably Born for Burning, Woman of Dark Desires, Sacrifice, and then A Fine Day to Die off Blood, Fire, Death.
Yep, and that's the first 4 albums right there.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean,
Fine Day to Die is pretty good, is really good. Woman of Dark Desires is fantastic.
Have you ever heard the Emperor version of A Fine Day to Die?
No, I haven't. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, they're on one of the Bathory tribute albums that came out well after the fact. And it's, my God.
It's Bathory done by Emperor.
Yeah, it was very, very, very good.
I can easily imagine that. But yeah, like that's one of those, like, this was a musical watershed, and like even before they even fully got out of the black metal scene, or the black metal thing on A Fine Day to Die was, or on Blood, Fire, Death, really was, they were already starting to get into the Norse metal.
Yeah, but I would say though with Blood, Fire, Death, it was still a black metal album. It wasn't until Hammerheart where they finally did like the full switch over.
Yeah, but you could start seeing those lyrical elements, especially coming in on Blood, Fire, Death, and then Hammerheart was the one where they really just switched over, which is why a lot of people hate that record.
It's a good record though.
It is. It's disgustingly good, but a lot of it's like, oh, it's not black metal. Bye.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, if you're going to be that way about it,
if you're going to be a purist,
yeah, then go fuck off with the rest of the hipster douchebags over there.
Yeah. I don't mind, like I've said before, I don't mind bands changing their sound, but do it well, number one. Don't half-ass it. And if you had a distinct sound, don't change it. maybe up the production or something. Like that's what I dislike about Dimmu Borgir. Their first two albums are distinct, and then on their third album, it's like, oh, well, we're just gonna go stereotype, quote unquote, mainstream black metal,
Yeah, they're
and leaned
just like,
into
we're
like
gonna
the
steal
goth
this.
side of things. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm done with you.
Yeah,
There's a
it's like that. There's way too much of a tendency for modern bands to do that too, where it's just
mhm.
like, oh, well, we're gonna go like the proven path. It's like, please don't. Your new stuff is actually interesting.
Another one would be there's a band out of Norway called Aeturnus,
I think
Aeturnus.
I've heard of them. Yeah,
Their first 2 to 3 records had such a distinct fucking sound, and then all of a sudden they decided to become like the Norway Deicide.
yeah.
It's like, what did you guys do?
It's like you had it. Where did it go? And
And
that's
it's
I think more that annoys me more than anything else. Like if a band's just never very good, yeah, okay, whatever. But when a band is that good and then just goes off the rails like that, it's
the
just like,
thing with them, from what I remember, is they thought it was going to get them more commercial viability, just going more mainstream style death metal, and it didn't. It pissed off everybody who was fans of them.
well, I mean, all you have to do is look at Metallica's fall from grace for that one.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the biggest band in the world in 1989, and then they came out with the Black Album, and like a third of their fan base told them to fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, and with the Eternus switchover, it was after that, and even with the first couple of Eternus albums, Metallica wasn't really much, thought of much in the underground at that point anymore. People still recognize their first 4 albums, and
because
that
those
was
were the
it.
good ones.
Yeah, and that was it. They didn't turn around and like. You very rarely heard bands that were coming out in the second wave of black metal reference Metallica.
No, ever.
Never. As well as I do, they were an influence.
Oh yeah, I mean, you listen. Everybody listened to those records.
But
everybody.
By the time these second wave black metal bands like Emperor, Immortal, Marduk, Dark Funeral, etc., they, you never heard them reference Metallica ever. Yep. Maybe in real early interviews they might, and they would probably reference like Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning. But after a while, you just stopped hearing it. Bathory was a constant. Bathory, Celtic Frost, Sodom, and Venom and Hellhammer were always referenced in the Black.
Oh yeah, and Sodom is the perfect archetype for doing a sound change right.
Yeah,
because they did it gradually. They did it over like 2 albums, and the stuff they were coming out with was
Marduk kind of did too. Because if you listen to the first 2 Marduk records, those of the Unlight and what the hell's that first record? That's gonna drive me nuts. I mean, those 2 records. I mean, I'm not a big fan of those 2 albums, but you could hear with those 2 records, and then going into Opus Nocturne, Dark Endless, going into Opus Nocturne, that there was a not so much a style change, but a sound change, and it worked.
Yeah, and the thing with Sodom was the lyrical content was never really there for their black metal period.
No, it was more war-oriented type stuff.
Yeah, songs like Napalm in the Morning, Agent Orange, M16, all fantastic tracks that you should listen to repeatedly. And Ember's brought up a good point. I'm going to try to get a Metallica stream going at some point. A lot of guys don't really want to talk about it.
Oh, I have no problem talking about it, because growing up, for me, my 2 favorite bands were Metallica and Iron Maiden.
Yeah,
and
they both failed us.
But I remember when the Black Album came out, I was a sophomore in high school, and I'm just like, I'm not really digging this. Yeah. And then a lot more people are coming out saying they liked Metallica because of the Black Album, and I even more went, oh, I'm really not liking that album now.
Yeah, it's like when all of the guys who like aren't even rock fans started talking, like, oh yeah, this is really good. Like, oh god, they're coming.
Yeah. Yeah, me and Pope and me and Nick, and as well as 70s Rock Fan, we've all been talking about more music streams like this.
Mila, that is on the docket as well, and you are more than welcome to be part of it on the panel if you want to. I know a ton of guys who are going to want in on memorializing Iron Maiden.
I mean, we're also talking about,
and Amber, you will be on the Metallica stream.
We've been talking about doing just
a
black metal retrospective as well.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
I could turn people on to so many bands that way that don't exist anymore.
Yeah, and like a lot of the black metal stuff, like especially the earlier guys, they got buried in the mid 90s, where it was just kind of like, oh yeah, your first 3 albums were good, and then you fell off the planet.
Yeah. there's also, if you look at that second wave of black metal that this influenced, it definitely started off very niche, very niche. But out of all the metal scenes that have come and gone and they're still around, etc., that was the most one open to experimentation. Because at the time, people heard keyboards or synth on a death metal album, they'd be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah,
black metal, it was accepted.
Black metal really never had that prescription against it. The way
look at Emperor, pretty heavy use of keyboards on their albums.
Even Bathory did it.
Yeah,
on Under the Sign.
Yeah,
and that was 87. So they've been doing it right along. So
it's so weird how
I said in the Ghost review, like some people, some purists are like, "Oh, keyboards don't belong in metal." Yeah, fucking hell, they don't.
Yeah.
Like tell that to like half of the most influential bands that have ever been in this genre.
Yeah, it's for a band that was so rigid in some ways, or for an era of music that was so rigid in certain ways, that being the second wave.
Yep.
They were also the most open to experimentation, synthscapes and keyboards, and like I've brought up before, there's a black metal band named Ved Buen's End out of Norway. That's fusion jazz meets black metal.
Yeah, which is cool as hell to me.
And it's the most bizarre shit you'll ever hear.
And I don't even care if it's really good. I care that they're trying.
Yeah.
And they're actually coming out with something unique and trying to mold new sounds into the genre, because that's what a genre needs to stay relevant.
Yeah,
new energy coming into there.
Look at the first couple of Arcturus records, especially the first Arcturus record when they were still more black metal.
Yep.
But they were like proggy, keyboard heavy, odd timings, kind of jazzy black metal, or In the Woods with their first record. They kind of switched way more into like the prog stuff and kind of ditched the whole metal scene, so to speak, almost in the same way Opeth did. Because if you go listen to the first couple Opeth records,
early Opeth was heavy as fuck.
Yeah, well, some of the stuff they do is still heavy. It's just more proggy.
Yeah.
Because some friends of mine that are real big into prog rock also turned me on to a band called Porcupine Tree.
Yep.
And the guy who's behind Porcupine Tree produced a lot of the more recent Opeth records.
Really?
Or had a hand in them in some way. And you listen to some of the Porcupine Tree stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, that sounds like fucking Opeth. So you can see, and that was also something else you saw too. Yeah, it's definitely Oliver Mila, definitely. Because their first three records, each album was different. First album was metal with clean vocals. Second album was all folk music. And then the third album was just pure lo-fi black metal.
Yeah, which I really dig, because it's a band trying to just trying different stuff out and just getting out of their system, essentially.
And you had some very experimental bands. And it's funny that you have these experimental bands turn around and reference albums like the Bathory self-titled and then The Return. It's like, you actually listen to stuff like that, but play this way. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, like when you start hearing references to these two records, it's just like, okay, I'm dealing with somebody who actually knows their shit.
Yeah, who's actually paid attention.
Because Bathory is easy to miss in the clutter of the 80s.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Most people I know back in the day thought they were a new band when they first heard them in like the mid 90s. Even I was like, no.
Well, that's also that sound has aged incredibly well too.
Well, yeah, because if we didn't have the second wave of black metal, I don't think it would have. I don't think that sound style would have aged very well, because you can now look at it as the beginnings of that, especially the Scandinavian scene, and they just evolved it.
Yep.
And you can go back and look at this and go, I see where this stuff started because of this. If you didn't have that, people would be like, oh yeah, this is just some insane 80s fucking craziness.
Yeah. And like, especially if it hadn't taken off, they would have just gone down as one of these odd little 80s experiments that never really quite panned out.
Right.
But instead they became the beginnings of a whole movement. And like I said, this wasn't, them trying to figure out what they were, like Venom was, or figuring out what this type of music could do. This was black metal fully formed and ready to go kick some ass and take some souls.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did they do it.
Oh, for sure.
And I like you say, they're influencing bands today, and the band has been gone for over 15 years.
Longer than that, I think. I don't think they were really doing much even in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think their last real record was like what, 2001?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Something like that. And it's hard to tell because they keep doing retrospectives and re-releasing old stuff that they never did.
And then after Hammerheart Forward, they essentially dropped all the black metal.
Yeah, and
then those albums are still considered influential, even in the black metal scene.
Yeah, like it was still Bathory, and they were still listening to it, even though it's not black metal.
Yeah, but again, you had bands come along like I would not be surprised if Blood, Fire, Death onwards was a bit of an influence for, say, Amon Amarth.
Oh God, yeah.
They were a bit of an influence. I'm sure there was an influence there for Enslaved.
Yep, and even some of the cleaner Viking metal bands like Tyr or somebody like that. These guys started it. Like these guys started, making black metal cool, or making Viking metal cool and talking about Norse mythology relevant again. And I think that's brilliant, and I think that's a really cool way to go. Sorry about this, guys. I've been sick the last couple of days, so you're not getting me at my best here. But we'll try to power through it. I'm probably gonna close things out here before too long because my voice is starting to fade. So better to preserve that if I can. But yeah, I mean, this band, it's almost impossible to overstate how influential they were in their genre and even to the scene as a whole. Even though they were never all that popular in terms of sales or touring or anything like that, nobody saw them live. Really, outside of Sweden, I think, like we were saying at the beginning, I think they did one American tour, and that was it. Because partially, it's probably trouble getting gigs, and also, given Corthon's death from a heart condition at 42, I think he had some health problems already in that era, and I think that was a big contributor. Because as I said, a tour is a brutal, grueling process on your body. And even guys in great shape that are in their prime have trouble doing it sometimes. So, it's entirely possible that he knew he couldn't handle another tour and had to back out. But, no, I mean, what kind of saying? Like, it's impossible to overstate these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look in almost any black metal heads or any black metal fans catalog, you will find these two records sitting there.
At least those two, if not more.
Almost 100% of the time. And if they haven't yet, smack them on the hand, call them a bad dog, and then make them go get them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because if you don't own it, you should.
Oh, I totally agree. There are certain albums that, if you're into certain styles of music and you don't own, there could be reasons, because I remember at the time, the one record store by me that specialized in metal couldn't keep certain bands in stock.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to hear Immortal, because they could not keep their records, the Pure Holocaust and Battles in the North, in stock at all, ever.
Yeah, and there's some, there are some records, that you should just own as a fan of that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a metal fan, you should own Paranoid.
Yeah.
Like, it should be in your collection.
I would also say certain Maiden records are mandatory.
Yep.
Not all of them, but
at least Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith by Priest, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you will own these records because everyone listens to them. And Overkill and Ace of Spades by Motorhead, too.
Mm-hmm. The first 3 Slayer discs.
Yep.
Show Mercy, Hell Awaits, and Rain and Blood. Everybody should own.
Everybody should have at least those 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 4 Metallica records.
Mm-hmm.
But
first
those are
records.
Those are ones that, like, if you don't own those songs, like, we kind of question your commitment here. It's like, I'm a fan. Like, are you sure?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, in some cases too, a lot of people might have owned those albums at one point, be it on vinyl or cassette, and just never got around to replacing them on CD.
Yeah, or in my case, I owned it all digitally, and then from when I was very young, and then I lost all of my, Napster goodies. So now I have to rebuy most of my stuff. Because most of that was gotten on the high seas.
You went a Viking to go get your music.
Indeed. Which, somehow I doubt these guys would disapprove.
They probably would. They probably still,
True.
It's. I've spoken to some black metal bands, and some don't care, but they're the ones who are still on the way up.
Yeah, true.
Maybe have an album or two out. They're not really well known. If they even have an actual album out, it might just be tracks. But for them, it's exposure.
Yeah, it's true. Like when you're early on in your career, you don't give a shit if people are buying it as long as people are spinning it for their friends and telling people. Then go for it. But like once you get really established, then yeah, you start to really care about that bottom line. And especially now that a lot of these bands are self-published too, they don't have a label.
Right. In a lot of cases, because when I was doing my internet radio show a few years back, we bumped heads with a few labels, and it got sorted out every time. But we bumped head with Metal Blade of all labels.
Really?
Yeah. It was just like, we actually did get the owner of Metal Blade, Brian Slagle, to pretty much tell all of the DJs personally on Facebook. Like he sent every DJ a message on that station and said, "No, you have my permission to play our music."
Nice.
But it got to that point where that had to be done because we all stopped playing Metal Blade music.
Yeah.
Because we found out they had joined the RIAA.
Ah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So we were like, nope, not touching it. Not going to deal with that because...
Like, I know Napalm Records can get touchy at times.
Oh, I'm sure nowadays.
Yeah, Nuclear Blast can as well, but, that's because they're the established ones.
Nuclear Blast has fallen so far downhill, though.
They still have some amazing freaking bands in their lineup, though. Sabaton's on there.
Wait, Sabaton's actually on... Oh,
yep, they're Nuclear Blast.
Oh, Nuclear Blast. Yeah. I don't know why for a second I was thinking Relapse Records for some stupid reason.
No.
They've really fallen downhill.
Yeah. They, disappeared.
I mean, I remember Napalm Records back in the day pretty much had, the bands they were known for were, Abigor, Summoning, and a couple more other of the oddball bands, and now they still pretty much sign a lot of oddball bands.
But they're a lot folk-oriented stuff. Symphonic side of the house, yeah.
Symphonic and folk, yeah.
I know Delane's on there, Nightwish.
Mm-hmm.
But that all gets into the inside baseball of freaking the labels and shit like that. Well, and some of them are fine, and some of them are not.
Right.
And you can never tell which ones are going to get a bug up their ass this week.
Yeah. I mean, again, the band I just mentioned, Abigor, another big influence band. Another band that was hugely influenced by Bathory.
Oh yeah,
and you can just listen to it, and you're like, oh yeah, the pure just chaos of some of their, especially their early stuff, in line with the Bathory early stuff. It's like, oh okay, there's definitely some parallels here.
Oh yeah, there's certain sonic hallmarks that whenever you hear it, you're just like, aha, I know what records you were listening to when you made this.
Yep.
And this is certainly one of them, especially the first record.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where it's yeah, I know exactly who you were slamming around.
Mm-hmm. And again, think about it. A tiny band, 3-piece band from some town in Austria. Huge. Well, these guys, but I was talking about
Abigor,
yeah. Influenced by a band that came around a decade earlier from Sweden. They don't want to say he was a small town in Sweden. For all I know, he's probably from one of the bigger cities.
Yeah, I don't know where he's from.
So it's amazing how music can spread around, especially in an era that was pre-internet.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was the cool thing with we were saying, the underground tape trading is you would never know where your stuff was going to end up.
Yeah.
You just put some demo tapes out there, and some guy in Germany would be listening to it and tell his friend from the US and somehow get it to him.
I mean, I got a couple demos that are kind of I guess you could say hidden gems. I actually have a Nile demo.
Ooh.
A Windeer demo.
And those are actually probably pretty valuable these days, where it's just these are old school shit.
And they're not some copy of a demo someone made for me. No, these were the actual demos from the bands.
Yeah. Which that happened a lot too, of guys just, making a copy of the cassette tape and then giving it to their friends.
Mm-hmm. It's like,
But
here,
that's how these bands would get out there back then. Like that was the only distribution method they had. It was almost like the punk bands, putting their band logo over every street sign, gas pump,
yeah.
stuff like that. Like, and you see it enough, you're like, who are these guys? I need to learn more about them. And then they got you.
Well, I mean, it's weird too how, especially with the underground, it was very insular too.
Yeah.
Like if you didn't know people or had, like you said, like a record shop that specialized in metal or even carried metal, chances are you weren't hearing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you were hearing the stuff that was on the radio and your favorite bands, and that was about it.
And at the time, Headbangers Ball.
Yeah. And they weren't going to play anything like this either.
No, they were not playing anything like that. I mean, they played some heavier stuff like, Testament or Slayer, and towards the end of the era of Headbangers Ball, they started playing death metal. They started playing Cannibal Corpse. They started playing Napalm Death. They started playing Carcass.
I think after Ace Ventura did it, a lot of places were much more willing to take the chance.
I wonder about that actually, because I know I bumped into people over the years who didn't realize that was actually a real band.
Yeah,
they thought it was just some sort of poke at the metal scene, and it's like, no, that's actually a real band. That's a real band from.
And apparently Jim Carrey's a fan of theirs too.
I've heard mixed things on that. I've heard him say he's a fan. I've heard him say he's not a fan, but he appreciates what they do. I've heard him also say he's not a fan and he thinks it's just so outlandish. How can it be anything but interesting? It's like, all right, pick a lane and stay in it there, buddy.
Yeah, well, that's Jim Carrey.
But it did get them exposure, because I've talked I've talked with Corpse Grinder and Alex about it from Cannibal. And they, Corpse Grinder wasn't there at the time, but Alex was, and he said it was surreal.
Oh,
because they realized, they were filming the movie there when they were playing, and they get pulled aside by some people like, hey, do you mind if we film for our movie? Blah, blah. And they're like, no. And then they didn't really realize what they were going to use of the footage.
Yeah.
And Alex was telling me, I was getting phone calls from friends like, dude, you're in a movie. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, that new Jim Carrey movie. Like, you guys are in the movie.
Yeah.
For like an extended shot, no less.
Yeah, it's not like they're in the background for like 2 seconds either. They're like front and center.
Front and center, and they give them a good 30 seconds of the song almost. And if memory serves me right, it was Hammer Smashed Face.
I think it was, because that had just come out at the time.
Yeah.
And that was their big break. Probably because of that movie. Everybody heard it, and then
Cannibal Corpse was always kind of it's hard to say, because they've been in the news prior to that because of Tomb of the Mutilated. Well, no. Yeah, because of that album that Hammer Smashed Face was from, Tomb of the Mutilated.
Yeah.
That album cover got them in a lot of trouble.
That is not the first or last time their album art got them in trouble.
Album art or song titles. Like, there's one off the next album, The Bleeding, that I will not say on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Marduk, where some of it is just like, yeah, we will get killed immediately.
It makes me wonder, though, with some of the Marduk stuff. I can think of one that probably would.
Yeah.
CRBM.
Yep.
That one, yeah. But I wonder on some of the other stuff, because it's, you know how people who lean left feel about Christians. So
fair.
So some of that stuff might go, but like certain ones, like I said, that the Cannibal song off of The Bleeding, that's 3 words, and you know which one I'm referring to.
Oh yeah,
that one would almost guaranteed get the streams, even either yeeted or temporarily taken down. And
oh yeah, I mean there would be no question about it. They'd be like, nope.
The funny thing is too, when normies experience underground metal, I remember going to see a show, and this girl I knew at the time showed up. I'm like, what are you doing here? You are not into this. You are not going to have a good time at all.
Like, you are not ready for what you're about to walk into.
And she literally was like, the entire night was just like clinging to my side. Like, oh my God, these people are fucking crazy.
It's like, welcome. These are my people.
Have fun.
Yeah.
And she was just like, oh, but another time I brought a buddy of mine to his very first metal show ever. And it was
Yeah.
a death metal show, and it was just a bunch of local bands, but he had a fucking blast. He's like, everybody was cool. Everybody,
The
people were
local
having a
shows
good.
are great too, because like you actually get to hang out with the bands and meet everybody, and like hell, in some of the smaller venues, you're like 20 feet away from the band at the back.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten lucky over the years. The venue I've seen a lot of shows at by me, the Chance in Poughkeepsie, New York, was small enough where, and also depended on the bands. Like some bands would hang out. Like I've hung out with George in the crowd from Cannibal Corpse because he's just walking around hanging out. I've met the guys from Dark Funeral there. That's a story for oh boy, that's a definite story. Jesus Christ.
No, I mean like even at the House of Blues in Boston, I knocked down Phil from All That Remains in a pit.
Yeah.
I had no idea until I helped him up. I'm just like, wait a minute, I just saw you on stage like 10 minutes ago.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, Mila. And one of the things like people seem to think like, metalheads are a bunch of barbaric brutes, but if you get knocked down in a pit, you got 10 hands reaching down and lifting you back up.
Oh yeah.
Immediately.
Like, and if you look, and like if you're at the edge of a pit and you look like you're fucked up, we'll just grab you and drag you right back out.
Yeah. Or, in case of point with a woman getting into a pit and her getting blasted, that poor dude that blasted that chick either better apologize profusely, and if he doesn't, and then sometime in the next couple of songs, that dude's gonna be catching a few elbows to the fucking face.
Oh god, yeah. And the funny part is like security tries to kind of keep things in check, but it's really the crowd that you have to worry about.
Yeah, a lot of the shows I've been to, the crowd was dealing with the pit, and the bouncers were too busy throwing people off the stage.
Yeah,
or keeping people off the stage.
Like, and the crowd just handles itself.
Mm-hmm. The only time I've ever seen bouncers step in is if a fight breaks out.
Yeah,
and even then, it's usually just to come grab the two guys from the crowd before the crowd destroys them.
Yep. The only time I really saw security start really moving on somebody is apparently somebody had a knife.
Yeah, stuff like
that.
So
that's just like, no. You are getting yeeted right now.
Yeah.
But like, that's the awesome thing about that scene is like everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows what time it is. And unless it's your first show, in which case you're probably going to learn the hard way. Everybody just kind of knows what to do. Although there's always that one guy when the Wall of Death shows up that's just a little behind everyone else. Like, I've seen it at a bunch of shows where like you'll see the crowd go to both sides, and then there's like 3 or 4 people in the middle, like looking around, like, what's going on? It's like, yeah, it's too late. You're about to get nailed. It's like, I don't know if you know this, but you're about to die.
Yeah,
but that's why you read up on some of this stuff before you look into it before you go to the shows.
Yeah, but most people have an understanding of what happens at a metal show in general. And unfortunately, moshing, for example, has become so ubiquitous across music scenes. Like, it's like,
yeah.
I don't know if you remember the Woodstock from the late 90s there.
Yep.
People were moshing to like the dumbest of shit. Like, what the fuck are you people doing?
Yeah, right. Just like, no, stop that.
It's like, why are you moshing to like Snoop Dogg? What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, right. Like, this one free show I went to up at Killington was really cool because the Dropkick Murphys were playing. The last song, they actually had a mosh pit going on stage. That's actually where I got my 04 World Series hat signed by Ken Casey.
Nice.
And, punk, metal, shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moshing music. Snoop Dogg or like that kind of shit?
Or pop bands. No.
Yeah. No, fuck off. Go away.
That's what drives me nuts. For example, too, you get a lot of people outside the metal scene using metal as a fashion statement. Like, how many rappers have we seen with like leather jackets with patches of metal bands? It's like, do you even know who these bands are?
In some cases, they do.
In some cases, not all.
Like,
not a lot.
I will say, Ice-T is a huge metalhead.
Yes, he is.
Like, hell, he has his own metal band.
I have nothing but respect for Ice-T.
Yep. And surprisingly enough, Lady Gaga's a huge metalhead too.
I pressing F to doubt very, very fucking hard on that one.
According to her.
Yeah,
and
again.
She seems like she knows her shit, so. And she's cool with Uncle Rob,
pressing
so she's
X
cool with
to
me.
doubt hard.
Hey, she's cool with Uncle Rob, so it's cool with me.
You know what? She's probably cool with Uncle Rob. Do you really want to know why? Come on, we both know
We
why.
all know why.
We all know why.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, but he's, Rob Halford's still somebody I would love to talk to at some point in my life.
I
I
would
doubt I
love
ever
to talk to
will,
him.
but, because I've heard he's a genuinely good guy to the fans.
No, that's what I've always heard is he's always a great dude and really, really knowledgeable. I mean, let's face it, he was there for the history of metal.
Yeah.
Like pretty much whatever era you want to talk about, Judas Priest was there.
It's funny. A buddy of mine way back in the day, I wouldn't say way back, but back far enough, met Ozzy. And I was like, so how was he? And he's like, he was actually really fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that he's if you get him in the right mood, he's actually pretty chill. Mila, I was actually gonna go see that tour, and they canceled the show in my area like 10 minutes before the show was supposed to start. Unfortunately, Rob wasn't feeling well that day, so I missed out. But that's fine. I'm sure I'll see them again. They're my favorite band of all time, and their live shows are freaking amazing.
Yes.
But they're running into territory like me and Nick were talking about in the Saxon review. How the hell do you even set up a set list with the amount of material they have? Like
you say that about a lot of bands.
They got more than an hour and a half.
Priest, Maiden, Cannibal Corpse, even Testament, Marduk.
Yeah, it's like your classic lists will be more than the set.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're just kind of like, well, I mean, we might as well play all the new stuff and then just play a couple old songs. But like new Saxon records like that too. Every song's a freaking masterpiece.
I mean, it just goes to show too. Some of these bands that have been around for decades still actually have it.
Oh yeah,
and their good albums weren't a fluke or wasn't just a product of the times. They can still actually craft good.
Yeah, and these guys are the real deal, and they're in it for the long haul. Because how many bands have you seen, like the Rolling Stones or whatever, that they were good in their prime, and then they never touched anywhere near their height again.
Mm-hmm.
Like after Sympathy for the Devil, I would say that Rolling Stones were never good again.
A lot of times, you also find bands that'll turn around and just keep rehashing. It's like, hey, this is the album that made us a lot of money. Let's do that again.
Yep.
And again.
Just like do something different.
Yeah, do something different. Do something good.
Yeah, like or do something at least interesting. Don't just do, the fifth rendition of freaking your classical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a tendency to do that, especially among record labels, because that sold.
Yeah, that's sold. We want that again.
Yeah. And yes, it's a short-sighted mentality because eventually the fans are going to get sick of it.
Yes.
But in the meantime, they're making a lot of money.
Well, that's why nowadays, after the second wave of black metal caught its upward swing, you saw a lot of bands kind of get built up and then disappear because it was like, okay, you're just doing the same shit. Every album sounds the same. There's no difference. And you saw a lot of that. The only bands from that era that are still really doing anything were the bands that had something distinct and unique.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, you had other issues with bands like Emperor deciding to pack it in for their reasons. They all wanted to go do different shit. Immortal splitting up.
Other bands at the same time, too.
Yeah, Immortal splitting up because of most likely Abbot's fucking drinking problem.
I mean,
we were talking about that last night.
Yours with no bun.
I mean, those guys are famous for being problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they're actually together and cooperating.
Well, yeah, that's like that with a lot of bands.
Yeah.
Either they don't get along, after a while, and they're just going through the motions so they can keep doing their thing.
And there's some bands out there, like, even like in the more mainstream side, like the Police, where they were such a great band, and yet they absolutely fucking hated each other. Like
it's
that's why
that happens.
Yeah, like that's why then they never liked each other. That was like they were together to make money, and after like 3 albums, they just couldn't take each other anymore and just left.
It's funny too, I'm sure a lot of that came from ego.
Yep.
And it's always funny to me when you see like these underground bands that only have a couple albums out start having problems because of egos. It's like, you guys aren't really.
You guys aren't big enough to swing your dicks around like that.
Yeah.
It's like keep an idea of who
Well, that's why I
you
always
are
found
and
it
where
funny
you
how
are in the
kind of
world.
Gorgoroth tried to position themselves once Gaul took over. It's like, yeah, but you guys are Gorgoroth.
Yeah, right.
What are you doing? It's not like you're Emperor. You're not Mayhem. You're not Immortal. Yeah, you were definitely one of the big parts of that second wave of black metal, but
You weren't one of the better parts of it.
yeah, I mean their stuff was good. It's just
Yeah, but they were
weren't
like the middle of the pack, really.
you weren't well known.
Yeah, it's like they were the middle of the pack. They were kind of they weren't bad, they weren't great. And then, it took, bands like Mayhem and Burzum dropping out to really bring them to the forefront.
Yeah,
And like you say, Gaul's kind
he's
of
a
gone
fucking
anyway,
prick.
Part of that's him, but
Yeah, well, he was also one of the assholes trying to, sue for the rights to the band name. It's like, you weren't even a founding member, cocksucker. What are you doing?
right? It's like, bro.
Especially when one of the founding members wanted the name back. It's like, what are you doing? You're not
Yeah.
going to know. And I'm glad the judge sided with Infernus on that.
Yeah, no, it's like, if he wants the band name, give it to him. Hearing me, Sharon Osbourne?
Yeah,
It's
right.
fucking Black Sabbath, not heaven and hell, and you goddamn know it. Defend that one to the day I die.
I'm with you on that. That's just stupid.
And that was just so unnecessary too, because it wasn't even Ozzy's band. Like, I could see if it was actually his band on paper,
but yeah, all they had to
legally
do
it's Tony and Geezer's band. Like, they co-own it.
And it's one of those things. If they're playing any song that Ozzy helped write, okay,
Yeah.
if we're going to play that live, we'll throw you some money. Shut up.
Well, I mean, we all know why that didn't happen.
It was money. They weren't
Well,
probably not enough money.
It was her father.
Oh,
Her father or uncle? One of the two is Phil Spector.
Mm.
So, yeah. Like, especially back in those days, like, he basically ran the record industry.
Yeah.
So, what he said goes. If you ever wanted to get a better deal or tour ever again.
Yeah.
And fortunately, later on, they seem to have relaxed that quite a bit.
Well, I think they realized, like, oh, hey, we could all make money.
Yeah.
Because they probably saw that Heaven and Hell was still making Black Sabbath level of money.
Yeah, because
they probably realized, like, oh, if we actually let them call themselves Black Sabbath, they could have made more, and we could have made more.
Yep. And they kind of realized, wait a minute, we're screwing our own wallets because,
ego.
Yeah, basically, because Sharon Osbourne said so.
It's one of those things, like, I've never understood, like, egos I understand it. I just don't get egos in the music scene, especially the underground scene. It's like, you should be wanting everybody to thrive.
Yeah, no, it's like, you guys are all in the same pond, and, you can all swim in the same direction and get ahead. Or you can sit there and snap at each other and just be nothing.
Yeah. So
it's very rare to see a band from that underground scene to break into like mainstream success like Cannibal Corpse did.
Yes, and it's even funnier too when you have like entire countries of the entire scene of a country being anti the scene of another country.
Yeah,
Sweden and Norway didn't like each other, but they both didn't like the Finnish black metal band.
Well, Sweden and Norway fucking hate each other anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean when you have things like Sweden advertising the Monty Python Life of Brian as a movie so funny, Norway banned it.
Yeah. And then the opposite was done in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
And both countries will tell this joke about each other. It's like, what's the one thing Norway/Sweden has that the other one doesn't? Good neighbors.
Yeah. It's funny. Speaking of that, long time for a while when I was playing WoW, one of my good buddies was American but Scottish descent. And he was real proud of his Scottish descent, so I screwed with him every way I could about being Scottish.
Oh God, yeah, you have to.
And so he got so irritated at me one day, he went and decided to go look up derogatory terms for like Norse people.
Oh God.
He's like, there was like 7, and 5 of them only mattered if you were Swedish. And he goes, then I go and look up, Scottish. He's like, there's a page and a half. I'm like, well, what does that tell you?
Well, it's also the British Isles. We make up new words to make fun of each other constantly.
Yeah.
Especially the Irish.
Yeah.
Like, you ever want to laugh, go drinking with an Irishman and a Scot. Like, you're either going to see somebody get punched in the mouth, or you're going to hear the funniest shit you ever have,
Or both.
or both. Likely within 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's fine after that too. Everyone's just like, yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Like, but you were just punching him in the face. Yeah, that's all done now. We can be friends again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same in the metal scene, to be honest with you.
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Like, I've gotten into a couple dust ups with people, and then we went for a beer after. It's just like, it's all done now.
Yeah, we settled our differences and
we hashed shit out. We both did what we had to do. So, drink, yes,
yeah,
and that's a very not even just British but European mentality of we can go at each other hard, and then it never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because it happens all the time.
Well, it did. I don't know about these days.
No, I mean, back in the day. I mean, let's face it, England and France have been at war with each other, 31 times?
Yeah.
And France has won like 2 of them.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the record period.
Because they're France. And beating up on France is basically what England and Germany are there for.
Yeah. And every once in a while, Spain will poke them too.
Yep. Not recently, though.
Not recently. That was definitely
Spain
more of like a medieval
Spain's
period
kind of
thing.
hanging out doing their own thing at this point. But, every now and again, like I love that meme when, the Ukraine war was first starting up. We were like, Russia declares war on Ukraine. America declares war on Russia. Yada, yada. Germany declares war on France. Sorry, force of habit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Germany invades Poland. Oops, sorry.
Wrong time period. My bad.
Or they might just cause.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's what we do.
But it's the underground metal scene is such a unique entity in of its own self, because it's morphed and changed over the decades, but at its core, it's still trying to do the same.
Yeah.
Still letting people express themselves in whatever extreme way they want to, or unique way they want to, without codifying everything to such an extent that any deviations will get you ostracized.
Yeah, I mean, the black metal purists would have that, and that would be their way of doing it, but all the rest of us fucking hate those guys. So, like the true cult people.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those for a long time, but even at the same time, I still appreciated stuff that didn't fall into that, true cult mentality.
Yeah, but like, I've run into them in the scene too. Of just like, I hate that narrow-minded shit of just like, this is what black metal is, and that's it.
Yeah. No,
there's a ton of other shit out there, man. Like, all you're doing is limiting yourself. And you're, really narrowing your own definition of what black metal is. And there's a ton of really good stuff out there that you're missing out on.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's also a ton of shit out there that isn't all that good.
Yeah, but you got to sort through it.
I mean, when there's a hipster black metal scene, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And
most of
yes,
that is looking at those guys very nervously, like, please tell me there aren't more of you.
Yeah, and for the people in the chat, yes, there literally is a hipster black metal scene.
Yes, there is.
Mostly in Portland. Go figure.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah.
Portland and Seattle are like where the hipsters were birthed from, and just for that, they should be wiped off the planet.
Yeah. Well,
it's like, you have cursed us with these people. They'll take your medicine.
Or New York City had its fair share, fairly big hand in that as well.
But can we at least like make them go back and live there again?
Yeah, well, one could only hope.
Yeah, instead of like being all up in our grill, just like, no, go away.
Yeah. When someone tries to tell me Wolves of the Throne Room is more black metal than, like, say, Marduk, I just kind of sit there and go, oh, just pat him on the head and go, okay, buddy.
It's just like, oh, it's okay, bud. You're retarded. We understand.
Yeah, you're mentally challenged. You're welcome here too. It's okay.
Just hand him a bike helmet and walk away.
Bike helmet and floaties. I mean, because for a while there, I was friends with Neil from Krieg.
Yep.
And he was telling me he did a show out in the West Coast. I was like, so how was that? He goes, knit hats and horn rimmed glasses as far as the eye could see.
Oh, no.
And Krieg is pretty, at least their old stuff is pretty lo-fi, filthy American black metal.
Oh yeah.
Well, they
I
kind
haven't
of
heard their newer stuff, but their old
it's
stuff
more like
pretty lo-fi.
It's still pretty lo-fi,
dirty.
but it's more like depressive black metal.
Yeah, but that's the shit they go in for.
And he's also a fucking idiot, anyways. He's practically turned fucking full-on hardcore leftist.
Oh god.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. My buddy Devin was the same way. He was the guitarist for Ash and Wings for a while, and then we don't talk anymore, unfortunately. It's too bad because he was actually a really good dude, but oh well. These things happen.
Yeah, what can you do, you know?
Later, Mila, and we do this every weekend. If you want to be on the show, absolutely check me out on Gilded. I put the link down in the description. That's a link to my server on there, and that's where I hang out most of the time. You'll find this goofball over there too.
Yep.
And a whole bunch of familiar faces. So if you want to hit me up and get on the show, then that's probably the best place to do it.
And
coming out.
As a little bit of an aside, for those in the chat who like their big stompy robots.
Ah, yes.
Me and Pope have been playing Mech Warrior 5, got our own Dick's Division mercenary company rolling. So, and it's a drop-in, drop-out kind of co-op. So you can join us whenever.
Yeah,
it's cross-platform. So Xbox, PC, good times, good fun. Us talking shit. We probably should start streaming that.
Oh yeah, just for the shit that comes out of our mouths.
Yes.
Probably on D Live though, not on Twitch.
Yeah.
Knowing the two of us.
Probably. So, as Pope said, thanks for coming out, Mila. I've seen your name in Comics' chat before.
Yeah, I follow you on Twitch, I think, Mila. So that's where I found out about her. The same thing with Amber. But yeah, you guys are always welcome to come up with ideas for the show. Usually, if I ask you guys to come on, I'll ask them to pick the album anyway. So if there's something you really want to talk about, absolutely come on the show, and we'll hammer it out.
Yeah, this has been a good couple of weeks. It's only going to lead to more interesting discussions, I think.
Oh yeah, man! I think this is only like the 5th live video I've done.
And then, you know, especially if we can get some other people joining us, like Nick or Rockfan or Dan Vask.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, if we can get Dan Vask on here, we just opened up a whole new universe.
Yeah, we should look into seeing about how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I can't get in touch with him. But
he gets so many tweets directed at him. I can't imagine he'd have. You know, I think that's going to be having to go through somebody we know who knows him.
Yeah,
just at least get the initial contact, and like I was saying to you the other night, get the initial contact and then do the legwork ourselves.
Yeah. But yeah, man, it's been like, this is a great stream. Always glad to have you on. And
oh yeah, man, anytime.
Especially when we're talking this kind of stuff, because you're pretty much the group's expert when it comes to.
I would not call myself an expert in anything.
You're much better versed in it than me or Nick, or probably are. Actually, you and Nick are probably the closest. We have
for as long as I've been alive and listening to metal for as long as I have. You're definitely going to pick up knowledge, but there's people out there who know even more shit than I do.
Oh yeah, there's dudes out there who are just like computers.
Yeah, and they'll mention bands that had like a demo that unless you lived in the area, you'd never hear of them. Like what?
Like, yeah, you've never even heard of this band before, and they only existed for like 6 months back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's been great. I'm glad we were able to get these guys out of the way, because these guys are a huge influence. And if we're going to do more black metal stuff later, it's important that we get Venom and Bathory established as like. We
might want to do a Sodom one too.
Oh, we'll definitely do a Sodom one, probably coming up pretty shortly here, because I'm a big fan of them. And those are kind of two of the pillars of black metal going forward.
Yes, and anything else we talk on involving the scene is going to
involve these guys, pretty much. So we're just kind of setting the stage for what's to come, and hopefully you guys will join us for that. Make sure you're subscribed down the big red button there. I think YouTube's been purging subscribers again, because I think I lost 2 or 3. But
I will throw the link for my channel into the chat for you guys.
Yep. Unfortunately, I did this last minute, so I didn't throw your channel link down in there. Unfortunately, sorry.
That's no problem.
But no, I mean, it's like these are going to be happening more and more. And if you want to be a part of it, I'm more than glad to have you guys on. I think me and Christian are talking next week about CCR.
Nice.
Which, they're not metal in any way, shape, or form, but I love rock and roll too. Like that whole side of the house is just great.
I got some good memories of CCR.
CCR is one of those bands that I think everybody has a great memory of at least one or two of their songs.
And I put the wrong link in the channel because I am not smart.
Well, these things happen.
Yeah. Like when you start getting me telling stories about my days doing Viking reenactment, oh boy.
Yeah, that's going to get fun. And we'll have to do a history stream at some point too.
That's yeah. I mean, the funny thing with CCR, I just remember a buddy of mine coming out of his tent, and we used big Viking A-frames. So he comes storming out of the tent, both flaps open wide, looks around at me and a couple of my friends. He's like, "I got this great idea." Yeah, what's that? I think we should get high and listen to CCR because no one's ever done that before. The fuck are you talking about?
I'm pretty sure that's the only way to listen to CCR.
Yeah, so, I mean, just ridiculous stories. Like, same guy went into one of the porta johns and comes storming out with a piece of paper. Oh, who put this blasphemy into the porta john? It's like some picture of Marvel Thor sitting on like a throne with his hammer. It's like Odin came, sat in wonder. Thor came and shat like thunder.
Yep.
And he's like, blasphemy. Why would you do this? Just screwing around. As soon as he starts going off like this big thunder crack, and this guy's like, okay, I'll go put it back now.
I love those moments too. Like, I mean, I can't tell half the stories from the field from when I was in the infantry, but
yeah, I definitely have to watch the stories I tell from those days too.
Yeah, because it's just, but some of that shit is just hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, watching a kid run to his bunker completely bare ass naked except for a flak and Kevlar.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Yep, I think he was like showering or something, and just hey, we started taking contact. So guess what? Somebody gets to get clapped by the dude with his dangly bits out.
Yeah. That's gotta be embarrassing for the opposing force. Like, oh yeah, did you hear about so and so? Yeah, he got shot by a naked dude.
if he's lucky.
Yeah.
All right, man. It's been great. Chat, you guys have been awesome. My voice is starting to go, so we will end it here. So thank you all for being here. Imperitus, you got anything you want to plug?
No, not at this point. The only thing I could say is you can usually catch me on Fridays on Foul Ball Productions and My First Cocktail Lounge. I'm semi-regular there. That runs usually 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to whenever we stop. We usually do 3 or 4 hours. You can catch me there. You can catch that 70s rock fan on there a lot. There's a bunch of other really good dudes like Just Another Red Shirt and Lord Thoth are on there, and Matt from Foul Ball, he's a great dude. So check him out with what the other stuff he does, and everybody else I just mentioned. And like that 70s rock fan, if you aren't subscribed to him, and you don't, I will find you and slap you.
Such an amazing knowledge and such a great dude too.
Yes.
Me and Imperitus were on his Metal God stream last week, and that was just a freaking amazing
blast. That was just a blast
of just a whole bunch of really knowledgeable guys just sitting down and talking the origins of heavy metal.
And lady, we did have.
Yeah, that's true. Courtney was there too. Yep. Sorry, Courtney. But yeah, no, it was just a brilliant stream, and we're going to be doing more of them. And make sure you check him out. Obviously, we're going to be doing more of these. So if you like what you heard here today, make sure you sub. Make sure you keep an eye out. Join me on Gilded because I hang out there all the time. And I also have a link up there or a calendar up there with all of my stream dates and shit like that. So when I know I'm going to be on something, I'll let you guys know. Usually, I've been slacking a bit in the last couple of weeks, but as always, take care and stay happy, stay healthy. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.